Hello, welcome to episode 11 of Digital Ascendancy, Powerland Info podcast series. On Digital Ascendancy, we're all about championing transformative digital solutions. And today on Digital Ascendancy, we have Mike Himbeault with Powerland and Anthony Nornabell with HPE as they discuss HPE Greenlake as an as-a-service platform and how it can complement your existing hyperconverged infrastructure and help you achieve more. So let's jump right into it and listen to their introductions and see what they have to say about Greenlake.
My name is Mike Himbeault. I'm with Powerland. I'm our Director of Business Solutions, and I own all of our project teams. So all of our projects for scope of work, statement-based work with all of our customers, and that includes work associated with HPE Greenlake, which is why we have Anthony with us today from HPE. Anthony, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Mike. Anthony Nornabell here. I lead our Greenlake Cloud Services sales team for Canada, which is our organization around consumption and consulting.
Great. So today we're talking a bit about HPE Greenlake. Give us a quick primer on what HPE Greenlake is.
Yeah, and I think it's evolved a lot since its inception. Really, it dates back to what we called flexible capacity, which at that time was more of an infrastructure as a service solution. But if I was to define it now for HPE, it's really our cloud offering. And so if you think about it, GreenLake is to HPE what Azure is to Microsoft. It's really our corporate strategy. But if you distill it down, it's the solutions that we provide to customers related to consumption or the as a service world.
How long has Greenlake or some version of it been around? Like, how old is this?
Yeah, great question. So we've been doing one form of consumption or another since 2012. So it's a long 10 years that we've spent working, refining, listening to our customers and our partners about what their needs and interests are. And as mentioned, sort of at the front end, it was really a infrastructure as a service play with a focus on the financial benefits of a consumption model versus the traditional large purchase and then grow into that footprint over time, where you'd either hit the mark correctly or you'd miss it high or low and either run out of capacity or just generally have too much capacity in the environment. And so since then, as mentioned, it used to be called flexible capacity. We've adjusted to be called GreenLake, which is our branding for everything that we do at HPE as a service. And so that could come in the form of compute, storage, or networking. And in the last 4 or 5 years in particular, you've seen a lot of solutions that have been created in the GreenLake space that are specifically focused on solving some of our customers' largest challenges.
Interesting. So that 2012 puts it at about the same age as our major cloud providers, right? Like they're 10 to 15 years old in their infrastructure as a service model. So those, I as Mike Himbeault, I could slap my credit card down in Azure, Google, or Amazon, and I could get some VMs, and that's how I got access to it. I know that was really marketed for folks like originally that either had data center problems that they didn't want to deal with or wanted to be born without a data center. I spent some time with a startup that had hundreds of GPUs in use for a couple hours a day and literally had nowhere to even store them if they shipped them there, right? So that was that model. So how did people originally get access to GreenLake when it was first born, and how do you get access to it now?
Yeah, one of the key differentiators from us, although we refer to it as a cloud model, it's located in a customer's data center or in a co-located environment. Really that hyperscale environment, as you describe it, where you put down your credit card and you just grow, there's infinite possibilities with the growth that's needed there. But what we were looking to focus in on and address those situations where a workload, application, or data wasn't suited for that environment. And really, what would be the requirement to create that similar operating model for customers, that pay as you go, the alignment of costs with actual usage, the elimination of over provisioning, and then ultimately, what you're seeing now is us layering on the services on top of that. Historically, customers would be able to access GreenLake by engaging with a partner such as Powerland to focus in on a specific bill of materials, really refine a solution that was specifically meeting their needs. And then from there, that would be deployed either on-prem at their data center or in a co-location facility. And then over time, that environment would grow through change requests, which are defined in the agreement, and the customers can really adapt to their business needs on the fly. Today, that's a much more refined solution in our GreenLake Cloud platform. The GreenLake Cloud platform was officially announced at our Discover event in Vegas, which is our premier customer and partner conference. And with that cloud platform, you're now seeing the ability for customers to request and provision their technology needs within the platform. So actual engagement inside the platform to request either a quote for new technology or to expand the environment that they already have to meet their needs.
Yeah. So the GreenLake Cloud platform that was announced at this past Discover.
Yeah. So I'll just rewind the clock a little bit. In the Discover of 2019 is when Antonio uh, targeted 2022 as our year to have everything that HPE sells available as a service. And so, of course, with the pandemic, we weren't able to get to Vegas for our annual event. But in June of 2022, we had that first revisit back to Vegas in person, which happened to align with
Hmm.
the date that Antonio had declared that everything would be available as a service. So it's a great event to listen to all of the solutions, hear all, and see all of the services that we've created in this culminating moment into 2022. But yeah, it was at Discover that we announced the GreenLake Cloud platform and all of the tiles and benefits that are featured inside that platform.
Outstanding. Okay, so I guess that sort of takes us to the next part, which is you mentioned that GreenLake is a consumption model and has that value both as a financial model and as a growth model.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we as Powerland see it with our customers is there's four sort of main parts of the way that GreenLake provides value to them. There's a financial model, both as a model of lease and as a model of consumption. Um, Equipment scalability for not just growth but expansion. You can grow the existing equipment you have, or you can expand into needing new equipment, right? As customers
Mm-hmm.
say move to VDI, you need a very different set of equipment from the HP product portfolio. There's the abstracted services, which you meant to everything as a service, whether that be containerization, Esmeralda, GreenLake, for private cloud, all of these sort of offerings. And then there's something we haven't touched on much, which is something I want to get to, which is managed services add-ons through GMS, right? GreenLake Managed Services.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that folks I think are going to the hyperscalers for. I never want to hear about another failed disk alarm again in my life.
Yeah.
Well, great.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to go to Amazon, or you don't have to go to a hyperscaler to get that experience. You can get that through GreenLake. That's something I want to make sure we touch on in a little bit. But for the financial side, for the leasing and consumption model, how does that work? How does procurement of GreenLake work? How do change requests work?
Yeah.
And how does this factor into the supply chain components?
Yeah, great question. So for GreenLake overall, and it's one of the questions I get asked a lot isn't this just a fancy lease? And the short answer is no. It's a service agreement that includes, and the portfolio has widened, but it ultimately includes the underlying infrastructure requirements, the services, and you mentioned management services, which is a great one we can touch on a little bit. Or it might even include the software because we have relationships with a number of ISVs where we can include their software licensing and support inside our overall GreenLake solution. But ultimately, what's happening inside a GreenLake agreement is customers are signing up to a term of 3, 4, or 5 years are the options that are available for our customers. And whether they choose to become involved in the underlying bill of materials and really want to refine that, what we would do with Powerland and the end user is come up with the right starting point. Because one of the key elements of consumption is to make sure you have a right sized environment that meets the needs of the business for, say, the next 3 to 6 months. That's then deployed on site. And so that's in the client data center. And there's an element of it that is a reserved amount, meaning a minimum commitment of that installed capacity. On top of that, we'll provide a variable capacity, which is giving the clients that agility. And it's the agility that that
Mm-hmm.
variable capacity provides that differentiates us from that traditional lease, which is a fixed amount over a fixed period of time. What we're able to create in the GreenLake solution for customers is deployed infrastructure with all of the software and services that they can adapt to the business needs by growing into the infrastructure that's there and deployed that they don't pay for until they use. And then, more importantly, in some cases, to recede back to a more normalized usage if the needs of the business change. So, if they're addressing a quick project that needs to be spun up quickly, 6 week proof of concept, let's say, as an example, the client can do that knowing that their next invoice will be increased by that usage. But then as that project winds down, they return to a more normalized invoice. And it's that variability that provides a key differentiator from a traditional finance solution.
Yeah, and I can see a lot of different use cases for that, right? I want to go through a disaster recovery event where I spin up another data center on my same equipment to run the top 20% most important business applications. Well, I need that extra 20% capacity to run my disaster recovery simulation. So there's all sorts of use cases I can see for that kind of a model. And you're right, it's not just a fancy lease. It goes a bit more than that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we find customers really value out of GreenLake is the multi-vendor stack for procurement.
Mm-hmm.
I can go out and on GreenLake and through change requests, I can procure and scale storage, compute, networking, routing, firewalling, security, software, managed services, almost regardless of vendor. I think you can even add data center services through GreenLake now. If I'm
Yes,
not
you
wrong.
can. We have partners
Yeah,
that for co-location in Canada that can assist with that data center. If a customer is choosing to make the decision to get out of the data center business, which to the point you raised earlier, which is a really good one around customers not wanting to concern themselves with the day-to-day operations. It's one thing to not concern yourself with the day-to-day operation requirements of the infrastructure, but some customers are taking it to another level where they're saying they no longer want to be in the data center business. It's not core to their functions. They want to work with entities such as Equinix that are really refining their skill set, capability, interconnection between their data centers, and leverage that as a part of a GreenLake solution. And you're spot on.
yeah.
Those pieces of that puzzle can be put into one agreement with an HPE agreement through Powerland. Absolutely.
I spent some time with a Canadian municipality, and their data center is on the top floor of City Hall, which is great because we're in a floodplain. Uh, However, it's less great when the roof leaks,
Yeah. Yes.
right? Or when a UPS battery grenades and takes out everything in the rack next to it, or it's those sorts of events where a business goes, we thought this was a good plan, but it turns out this can go really wrong really quickly,
Yep.
and all of a sudden everything goes dark, or worse, it's dark for good. Right. So having the ability to, on a GreenLake agreement, just all of a sudden just make a phone call to your Powerland rep and say, hey, we're ready to scale our entire data center. Like,
Yeah.
what does that change request look like? How do I send this to someone else's problem inbox?
Yeah.
The ability to do that through one existing procurement vehicle is highly valuable.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
I'd also highlight because we are, and we didn't touch on this, but we can go there now. Because we're metering the technology in order to generate that monthly invoice based on usage. The core elements of that are a software technology we have that's metering the client's environment. If it's storage, as an example, we would be metering at per usable gigabyte per month. And then the
Right.
agreement generates a cost, a very predictable cost over the term of the customer. So as they're figuring out how to onboard new projects, which may have a storage requirement, they can look to their Powerland agreement and very clearly see what the costs are per usable gigabyte per month, do a P times Q exercise to budget very predictably. But because we're metering that environment over time, you're going to generate capacity planning scenarios. So the AI will kick in, you'll understand usage, and the actual GreenLake Cloud platform can provide a customer in Powerland, in fact, with capacity planning projections. Based on your current usage and your current trajectory, you can anticipate requiring a change request to replenish that variable capacity and stay ahead of the demand in the environment at X date, however many months down the road that's being predicted. So you're starting to see the platform generate actionable insights for a customer, both from how they're using it to who's using it within their environment.
Yeah. And it's not just scaling up, right? It's growth of your infrastructure, and an application lifecycle realistically is 3 to 5 years, at which point you'll see major patches, major rewrites, whatever that looks like, whether it's developed in house or it's your SAP or whatnot. But that infrastructure also has a life cycle to it, right? So right now we have a lot of customers that are looking at high performance single SQL Server nodes, and they've been around forever, and they're looking at fast, high frequency, low core count CPUs for licensing, and they're looking at fast SSDs for storage to speed up that one VM that runs all their analytics, right? And they're looking at new architectures, which is scale out object storage with scale out function as a service or containerization through Kubernetes. And the equipment they need is fundamentally different. So GreenLake, one of the ways that we pitch it to our customers is as a unique ability to align business strategy with technology procurement. And as boring and corporate as that sounds, it's extremely valuable because you can set up a GreenLake so that you start at the top of your burst capacity for that fast SSD storage. And over time, you're dwindling down in it as you move it over to a modern architecture,
Yep. Yeah.
right? And by the end of your 3 years on that fast SSD, you don't need it anymore. You don't refresh it. And instead, you double your object storage capacity or you do something else, right? You throw Esmeralda, which I want to talk a little bit about for containerization orchestration into there. And you license all of your compute cores, not just that small set. So that's the other part of it, where it's not just, okay, I want to grow the same things I've always got. I want to keep adding more of that. It's about growth in a more abstract sense.
Yeah.
Right. I grow and mature as an individual. You grow and mature as a business. Your infrastructure. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody wants CPUs. Nobody wants storage. They're sort of a necessary component of running a business application. So that's one of the ways that we position it, and it's really enabled by all those as a service components of GreenLake's offering, whether that be containerization through Esmeralda, whether that be the ML ops structures, private cloud, GMS, which I want to talk a little bit about right away. It really is an ecosystem where it's not big enough to blow your foot off because there's a fair amount of forethought that has to go into these change requests. Unlike Amazon, where you pull the wrong lever and all of a sudden you have no credit card capacity anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So that's there too. So maybe talk a little bit about just that cost control capability that GreenLake offers that you aren't going to get from a hyperscaler.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of ways to address that one. One is, as mentioned early, within the agreement that's created with Powerland, customers will very clearly be able to see and predictably identify their costs over the term of the contract. And a key area for us is as the environment grows, we recognize that there's economies of scale that will be gained. So in the example I used earlier around per usable gigabyte, if we stick with that for a moment from a storage perspective, as the customer environment grows over time, again, considering we've started with a right sized environment for their needs for a shorter period of time, and then as they're making decisions on where a workload or application will land and the data associated with it, it may land in a hyperscale environment. That very well may be the best fit for it. But if it does need to grow in the on prem or co located environment with GreenLake, they know that as that environment grows, that cost per gigabyte will decrease over time. And so that's built into the agreement. So that's a cost control in and of itself. Probably the more dramatic cost control is that there is a finite amount of infrastructure installed at the customer location. So again, if you think about it with the reserved amount being the minimum commitment, the variable amount sitting on top of that, and as the customer uses it, there'll be all kinds of signals for them in their dashboard to identify and alert them when they're starting to encroach on the ceiling of what's installed. But ultimately, it's their choice, should they choose to issue a change request with Powerland, to increase the footprint of infrastructure that's deployed on site. So that's kind of a real hard line, which some customers like to have that, to your point, around a hyperscale environment where it may get out of control in the sense of who's turning on what, when, and how, and for how long. And so that's built into a GreenLake agreement. But I just want to go back to something you said earlier with respect to a customer's changing needs and how GreenLake could grow with them. An area where GreenLake really presents an interesting use case for customers is if a lot of customers, depending on their size, will be dealing with a large amount of infrastructure that's already installed on site. It could be multi-vendor, could have a lot of complexity to it. They're looking for an efficient and simplified way to modernize and transform that need from what is currently in the environment today to what their needs are going forward. With GreenLake, you have an environment that, as that project plan identifies itself, and to your point around making the decisions around what's needed when for which application, customers can very predictably grow their GreenLake footprint as that project plan evolves. So then you're not having to outlay capital, whether it's financed over a fixed period of time or whether it's paid for all up front. You're aligning your costs with your usage, but you're also aligning your costs with that project plan. Becomes very interesting for customers because a lot are making decisions on cloud smart, right? Where's the best place for a workload application or data to sit? And contrary to some, potential public opinion about GreenLake competing with Hyperscale, we don't. We understand the value of Hyperscale, that there's use cases where it's a perfect fit. Where GreenLake comes into play are those applications and workloads and data sets where it's not a good fit, but the customers aren't looking to have to make a choice between that ultimate experience of the cloud's agility, To your point around manageability, whether they have interest in managing it or not, they want to be decoupled from that. So GreenLake provides that
Yeah.
solution for customers on-prem or in colo.
And then the other part where GreenLake compares to public cloud is I'm going to pick on S3. I have many years of cloud native AWS architecture for startups, scale ups, HPCs, machine learning, like all sorts of stuff. So I've done things with Amazon S3 that are truly magic. Like S3 is magic. It's ground up fairies stuffed into silicon and off it goes. But there are parts of it that aren't great, right? So S3 has the famed 11 nines of durability, but 4 nines of availability. So if you go and request an object, whether that be an image for a website or a piece of data for machine learning or a backup object, 1 out of 10,000 times it's not going to work. And your app will retry and it will work the next time. But that means that if you have a latency sensitive application, customers looking to make that in-app purchase now in the middle of your mobile app battle, it may not work.
Mm-hmm.
And that customer may experience 500 or 700 extra milliseconds or seconds more latency than their opponent. And you can't control that. You don't get to choose how those hyperscalers architect your application. GreenLake lets you take that same high-level service you expect, object storage, scalable object storage, and you get to control how it's architected.
Yes.
You get to choose whether it's MinIO or Weka or some other software offering or your own, and you get to control the storage and the compute and the networking in between. So you have control over those sliders. And at the end of the day, you're paying for what you value.
Yes.
Right? With the cheapest $5 a month VM you can get from any hyperscaler, you are paying redundant multi-terabit internet transit, redundant UPS and generator capacity. Well, I don't care. Right? I just want something that is cheaper than a Raspberry Pi because I can't buy a Raspberry Pi anymore. Right? Like that's all I want. It doesn't need to be that durable, but those aren't sliders I get to drag. And as an individual, that doesn't really matter. But as a corporation, as a company, as a business with a bottom line and outcomes I need to meet, those are sliders I want to be able to move. Right?
Yep.
So that's something GreenLake gives you, is that it lets you have that control over not just the infrastructure and the model, but how it's deployed and where it's at.
Yeah, and that's something that works very well between HPE and Powerland, is that ability to understand the customer need upfront, be able to address whether it's a technical requirement at a bill of material level or whether it's an architecture decision that needs to be made. You've nailed it, right? You're in control of the design. I will tell you, one of the interesting things about our evolution of GreenLake from where our origin story was, we've created more solutions where it's modular infrastructure. There's fewer choices because that's one thing that works in the marketplace for customers who require that, who just want to say, here are the needs that I have. This module will address it, and I'm happy. But there is the other half that has that need for a very specific design, whether, as mentioned, it's an architecture design or a technology design. And that's in complete control. As Antonio mentioned in 2019, and as we are now at the point in 2022, everything that HPE sells is available as a service. So finding those dials and knobs and levers that customers need to turn to find the solution that's the best cost and performance that they can have, they have the ability to do that and then acquire it through an as a service solution through Powerland.
And it's interesting, right? Because GreenLake is not a replacement for a hyperscaler or a cloud footprint, right? It's not a competition, as much as there is a great deal of overlap, and the two of them should be considered against each other, right? If I'm looking at virtual machines, okay, I can do VMware on GreenLake with all the licensing baked in, or I can do VMware on Amazon. Like, yes, I could do one or the other, but they aren't mutually exclusive. But you could do both for very good reasons, right? There are different cost models. There are different performance levels. It's, for example, if you are an entirely blade chassis system or a place where you don't have accelerators anywhere, and all of a sudden your business hires a fancy hotshot data scientist and they're like, okay, I want to start running some models. Nuts. We don't have anywhere to put that.
Yep.
None of our chassis support that. all right, well, now we can leverage our VMware on GreenLake and we can adopt a VMware cluster out of Amazon or Azure or Google or whatnot. And we can spread our workload around,
Yeah.
right? We can do that kind of thing. And we can leverage the scalability of that cloud provider and the costs, um, predictability and control of on-premise.
Yeah. Well,
And things like Esmo, things like Esmo let you do that natively,
mhm.
right? You can adopt a Kubernetes cluster from a cloud provider, or literally running anywhere, and you can adopt a Kubernetes cluster running on existing on-premise infrastructure and manage through the same pane of glass.
Yeah, and you mentioned cost, which is again, and I like the idea of just reinforcing that we don't compete with a hyperscale. It's about making the choice. So as Powerland works with your customers to figure out what is the right place for a workload to sit or for a developer to engage with what they need to do, we give the customers the ability within that GreenLake cloud platform to have visibility into the costs. And that's not just the visibility to the costs in the on-prem GreenLake environment. Customers can put in their credentials in Google, Azure, or AWS and have the same visibility into their usage and their costs in those hyperscale environments. So it's really helping to manage the costs as those decisions are made. And clients have the ability within the platform to create their own personalized alerts, whether those alerts are based on time or budget, such that if it's in the on prem environment and it's a developer who's working, or it's in the hyperscale environment and a developer is working, they can really get that dashboard that gives them green, yellow, red scenarios as they encroach on either the budget or the time based policies that they set for their users. So, very compelling way for customers to handle the cost controls both on prem in GreenLake as well as in that hyperscale environment.
And setting those sorts of policies in technology is something Powerland is
Mhm.
very well versed in helping customers with. We've been HP GreenLake Partner of the Year 2 years in a row now, right? So we do GreenLake all day, every day with a lot of our customers. So helping them figure that out, helping them set the priorities, the goals, what moves first, what moves later, what sits where. That's something that we do a lot of, and we find that customers are regularly having the conversation around, oh, so it isn't cloud or bust, right? We don't have to make that mistake
Yes.
to come back. We can
Yeah.
we can skip making that mistake and we can jump straight to learning from the mistakes other people have made. And that's a big thing that a lot of our customers are working through, is recognizing that they don't have to learn by making the mistake themselves. There are some mistakes you have to make, and people are going to make them. Every good sysadmin has one data loss event in their history, and they've learned from it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not every business has to have that exorbitant cloud bill if they don't want to.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Anthony, is there anything else about GreenLake that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think the one that jumps to my mind, Mike, is there's a lot of momentum around customers wanting to be able to take a stronger policy with respect to sustainability. And my conversations, as I'm sure with your customers as well, has increased a lot in the last couple of years in particular, related to how they can help address some of the sustainability objectives that they have for their corporation. And I would just highlight that within GreenLake, if you can imagine, as you're aligning and creating a right sized environment, you're eliminating over provisioning. Well, that means that you're no longer powering or cooling more than you need. Not only is it cost effective for you because you're not powering and cooling infrastructure that's not generating any value for the business, but you're also just in general not powering and cooling more than you need. And you layer that on
Yeah.
top of a co-location environment where you have data centers such as what Equinix provides, which are built as efficient as possible. And because it's their core competency, you're layering that efficiency on top of an environment that's right sized. It's a really helpful conversation for customers who are looking to figure out how they can start to hit some of their sustainability objectives and really reduce the amount of compute and storage that they're powering and cooling in that environment. So very compelling, and an area where GreenLake can help 100% of the time because we're eliminating that over provisioning.
And to add to that, you get to choose the components of your GreenLake deployment, right? If you want to choose more efficient processors, more efficient storage, more efficient,
Absolutely.
all of this kind of stuff, you can choose to either reduce your environmental footprint, reduce your costs, or cram more compute into the power envelope you've already got in aging data center infrastructure,
Absolutely.
right? Any one or combination of these that matches your business objectives is things you have control over.
Yep, 100%. And that's where insights from Powerland will help customers based on the experience you're seeing, layered with the technology and benefits from HPE. It's a great combination to help customers hit those sustainability targets a lot faster than they might have thought possible.
Outstanding. Okay, Anthony. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. I think this has been an excellent primer on what GreenLake is and what it isn't. It's not a competition for public cloud. And hopefully this helps our customers make some of these decisions for themselves. And we're more than happy to help them. And if having your team to lean on in the background is excellent for us.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Great conversation. Nice to talk to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Anthony. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so that you can hear the latest and greatest about Powerland when it comes out. Follow us on social media at Powerland_CA on Twitter, Powerland Canada on LinkedIn, and Powerland CA on Instagram. And also follow us on Facebook. Thanks for watching.